Alright, so this is part 2. So we're going to have this up here as our positive prompt, which is going to be an articulated figure and an action pose, ballerina with a coffee. And then that'll be the negative. We're just going to use standard Juggernaut XL. That is a pretty versatile model, so that should be just fine. All this should be pretty standard if you're familiar with Comfy already. You know, this is our K-sampler down here. I do have these nice labels up here. So this is just your basic input right here in the blue. So this is step 1, once you have all the other stuff that you should already be used to. This is going to be a depth model. So we're just going to use the SAI controlnet XL depth model. All these are available on Civet at this link here, which is actually in the workflow. So you can just reach out and grab that if you need to. We're going to use this robot image here. And we're going to use the Zoe depth map. And this is what is going to allow us to extract the depth data. So we have our controlnet preprocessor chosen right here. And then, I'm sorry, this is the preprocessor. This is where it gets applied. So this is what actually allows it to decode the information from this preprocessor. So what you'll see when I run this, you should see this rough shape get extracted. So there you go. There's the rough shape. But really this is just a white and black image that it doesn't really know what to do with, which is why we're passing it here to the apply control net, which is where this model is essentially telling it this is what that image, or why that image is relevant. So it's telling it this is the depth that you need to pay attention to, or this is why this image is relevant to the conditioning. Because again, this is just pulling the conditioning from your encoding up here, and it's passing it down here. And then it's converting this, or it's not even converting it really, it's actually augmenting it further. You're taking your conditioning and it's being augmented by the data extracted from this image, which is then going into this new set of conditioning that's coming out. And in this case, it's a positive and a negative, and then it's going to move down to here, which I'll get to that in a second. But the most important thing to know is it's going directly into your K-sampler, and that's where your image is actually being generated. So now you can see, here's an image, it's not very well conforming to it, and the reason is because it's at 0.5 strength. So if we were to rerun this and bump it to, let's say, 1.1, and rerun it, we should hope to see that the image is conforming much more strongly to our controlnet image here. And it's not running. Randomize it. There we go. So now you can already see that initial image loaded in there with that, and you can see it actually in real time as it's processing it now. You can see that outline forming more closely. Yeah, it probably will be a little bit. So maybe this wasn't the best example to use, but maybe we need to put a background image, or at the very least probably change the latent image aspect ratio to something that matches. So this is 8. Let's try 896 on that and see if that makes a difference. But there's no doubt that it is influencing the image in some way or another, though. just given how it's forming. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, the weights are probably the most important thing to adjust once you have all this set up. So that in particular with depth map can be very powerful. And then if we move down here as well, you'll see we have the canny from the previous model incorporated in here as well. And this is just a matter of messing with these values from a scale of 0 to 100. There's actually a couple of different canny applier models that you can get a hold of. Um, mhm. So open pose is pretty much identical, to be quite honest. So the only difference is you're going to change this node here from canny, and then you're going to find one that is suitable. There, this one, the 10 cent arc open pose. There aren't many SDXL models that are applicable to controlnet, unfortunately. I think there's maybe like one. There's maybe one for each one right now. I think the hope is that'll eventually change, but if we go in here and we do, hmm um, if I just search open pose, I wonder if there we go. That's what I needed. That is correct. Yes. So whenever you're changing out, so whenever you swap out or modify this in any way, you always want to make sure your load control net model matches whatever your preprocessor is. So in this case, we need to make sure that OpenPose is selected here. We need to remove the canny model and make sure that the image is now being applied into the new preprocessor and then passing that image over to here. So this preview image right here is going to show us what this is decoding out as. So rather than seeing a line art model now, you should see a rainbow stick figure in its place when we now run this. hmm So there you go. Now we have this model is distilling out the stick figure, and I mean it's not perfect, but for the point of our experiment here, this is fine. And you're going to see that as well, this is only a 0.5 strength, and this is 1.1. So the depth model is going to overpower it a little bit, as you can kind of see here. That's, again, it's a bad prompt, but you can kind of see where that's going to be troublesome. So now if I increase this one to 1.1, you should see a much stronger correlation between the open pose figure and the ballerina, because honestly the depth map is probably not going to work very well for what we're trying to go for here. And again, I'm using the K sampler advanced, so I need to make sure I randomize it. So, I mean, all in all, I would say that that's conforming pretty darn well to the stick figure we're seeing there. We got the arm kind of bent up, and in order to compensate for that, it's kind of hidden the arm behind the figure. But the other arm is up. It's holding the coffee. It's doing what it can with the information it's been fed. So overall, I'd say that's a pretty successful experiment. So I think that kind of covers like the 100-foot up view of it. You know, you guys should already be somewhat familiar with operating with K samplers, the VAE code. I mean, this is the same thing, really. I mean, I could get rid of this; it wouldn't make a difference. The VAE. Mhm. The VAE code is like baked into this one, so I mean, technically speaking, I don't need to have this. I could just run it from there to there, and it'll be the exact same image. So that's the nice thing about these is you just have options. And you can always turn these into variables too if you wanted, which is kind of cool. If you're not familiar with that already. I mean, do you have any other questions? Yeah, I would think the number one thing is getting those models downloaded and placed in the correct locations. But if that's there's no LoRa's with a controlnet model. I mean, you can use them, but are you talking about my workflow? Oh, no. I'm still recording, so I'm just trying to focus on this right now. But I mean, if there's nothing else, I'll just stop recording. Okay, well,